Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome into another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys listening in. We got a fantastic show lined up for you guys here today. For the first couple of segments, we're going to talk about the reasons to be optimistic, or the surprises for the first 10 days or 2 weeks here of the Major League Baseball season. I'm then going to give you guys an update on college baseball, where things stand in the top 25, since it's been a couple of weeks since we touched base and figured out what's going on at the college level. I always like to follow along and see how that's going as the road to Omaha is continuing on here. And then finally, at the end of the episode, giving you guys an up-to-date on the latest series that took place during this week and letting you know if anything changed here across the standings in the past couple of days. So let's jump right into it. Let's start out in the American League, right there in the American League East. And we're going to start out with the Toronto Blue Jays. And the Blue Jays have had a couple of guys who have surprised here early on, starting out with Julian Merryweather, a right-handed pitcher. Coming into this past year, he had only thrown 13 innings, and they were just okay for the Blue Jays last year. You know, other than that, he's kind of bounced around in his career. I mean, he's already 29 years old, but now this year, he struck out about half the batters he's faced, and he's locked down the closer job on a team that has every opportunity. And this guy is coming out just throwing straight gas out of the bullpen. This was one of the questions for the Blue Jays coming into this year, was ultimately who's going to be the closer. There were a few roles up for grabs, and Merryweather has just come in and absolutely looked fantastic. I mean, the guy throws absolute darts. He's been fantastic, so whatever they talked to him about this offseason, or whatever he was finally working on there in Toronto, it's certainly been a positive for Merryweather. There's also Vlad Guerrero Jr. I mean, he's come out looking hot. He's hit the ball all over the yard. He started 11 for 29. He's got 2 home runs, 8 walks, which means his on-base percentage was up to .538. And with, no George Springer in the lineup, this is absolutely huge. And Guerrero, he came into this year a little bit slimmer, lost a little bit of weight, made himself a better athlete because, you know, he was a big guy last year, and he was having trouble getting around on that inside fastball. But come this year, he's lost some pounds. He's got a little bit of a boost on his launch angle, and it certainly seems that things are looking up for him here in 2021. His exit velocity is extremely high, even on the outs that he's making, even on ground balls. He's hitting those things hard, so as long as he can kind of maintain the trajectory he's on, he's looking at a really, really good 2021 for the Blue Jays. Next, we got the Baltimore Orioles, and this one really comes down to one guy, Cedric Mullins. This guy is just an absolute hitting machine for them early on. He was kind of a semi-regular last year, got some at-bats, really couldn't hold down a starting job for them, but this year, after the first week, now 10 days, he's leading the league in hits, and I think he's been caught here over the past couple of days, but through that first week, man, he has been absolutely fantastic. He was hitting .459, 17 for 37 here. Coming into this week, obviously not a huge sample size, but hot starts, compile that with career highs or personal highs in exit velocity, hard hit rate. And this guy's been keeping Baltimore afloat here for these first couple of weeks, and has been a ton of fun to watch for the Orioles, who, may not have a lot to be thankful for, a lot to be optimistic about. But certainly Cedric Mullins has been fantastic for him. For the Tampa Bay Rays, you got Jeffrey Springs, a left-handed pitcher. I mean, a journeyman reliever. He's turned into a bit of a shutdown guy this year. I don't know how he's done it. He's got a 5.2 career ERA, but suddenly now he's been perfect over 4 games, over 4 outings for Toronto. It's been fun to watch for Jeffrey Springs, so we'll see if he's going to be able to keep that up here moving forward. And then, of course, you got Tyler Glasnow. He had another great outing this week, 14 strikeouts, and that new slider he's throwing out there is absolutely legit. I mean, he hasn't been the problem down there in Tampa Bay to start the year. He's only allowed 1 run, a couple of walks through a dozen innings. Again, he had another great outing this past week, but the new slider, the opponents are only 2 for 11 against that, so compile that with almost a triple-digit fastball, a hammer breaking ball, and I think he's going to be in for a good year this year in Tampa Bay. Now you got the Boston Red Sox. Garrett Whitlock has been promising here early on, as well as J.D. Martinez. But for Whitlock, he's got to be one of the biggest surprises because he's thrown 5 1/3 scoreless innings after they plucked him from the New York Yankees in the Rule 5 draft, which means if you spend 5 seasons with the team in the minor leagues and you're not yet on the 40-man roster, you're eligible to be taken by other teams. And the Red Sox look like they got a good one from the Yankees in Whitlock, as he's been fantastic here through the early on. And then you got J.D. Martinez. I mean, I talked to you guys. He had a brief stay on the COVID list in Monday's episode, but came off of that, hit 3 home runs against the Baltimore Orioles. His exit velocity's back up. He's hitting almost 500, a ton of extra base hits, up to 12 plus on the year. He's been absolutely fun to watch. And just, man, I love watching him just rake baseballs there for Boston. And then for you Yankees fans out there, of course, it's got to be Gary Sanchez. I mean, the guy is leading all Yankee hitters in slugging, OPS, which is on base plus slugging, and home runs. Now, he's still struggling a little bit behind the dish, him and Garrett Cole. Got to get on the same page. Cole's ERA is almost 4 during their starts together, but if this guy can continue to hit a couple of home runs, almost as many walks as strikeouts, an exit velocity of over 90 miles an hour on balls he's put in play, it's just been a good start for Gary Sanchez as he tries to get back on pace here. Transitioning now to the American League Central for Cleveland. Emmanuel Chase, right-handed pitcher. This guy's throwing 100 miles an hour like it's nothing. I mean, I feel like there's more guys across Major League Baseball throwing 100 than ever before, but Chase has been electric. He's a guy that they got in the Corey Kluber trade a few years ago, so he's been very good, and their offense has been solid. I mean, Jose Ramirez, he's been good, a couple of stolen bases. They moved on from Lindor, and yet this offense is kind of hanging around. So the offense has been okay, and then you got Chase, or Clace, excuse me. I'm calling him Chase. His name is Clace there out of the bullpen. I apologize there, Emmanuel. You got the Kansas City Royals' Jacob Junis, a right-handed pitcher. He had been all over the place for the Royals, but started this season with 7 scoreless innings. He's worked both as a starter and a reliever, so he's been certainly a surprise through his first couple outings this year. And then you got Michael Taylor, who looks like a steal from the Washington Nationals. He's homered. He hit a home run in Kansas City's first 2 games. He was hitting 370 through 7 games this year. He's got a 96.3 average exit velocity. He reworked his swing, put on a bit of an overhaul there. So he's been very good. Michael Taylor and Jacob Junis for the Royals. Certainly early surprises. For the Tigers, who else could it be but Akil Baddoo? This guy is absolutely fantastic. He homered on the first pitch of his career, hit a grand slam the following day, had a walk-off hit the day after that. So this guy's looking like a cornerstone in the lineup for them. They got Riley Green coming up, Spencer Torkelson, and yet Baddoo looks to be very, very solid. He was last year's Rule 5 draft, and man, it's just fun to watch this guy. 313, couple of home runs, hitting in the clutch, playing good defense, and just seems like a real good kid to root for here early on for the Tigers. For the Twins, it's Byron Buxton. Everybody knows Buxton now. He was a former top overall prospect in the game of baseball. He'd been getting hurt up and down, in and out of the lineup, but we're finally getting the Buxton that we were promised here as a prospect. He's hitting almost 500. It was 480 last time I checked. 5 home runs, 4 doubles through 8 games. Obviously playing Gold Glove type defense there in center field, running a ton of balls down. And maybe this guy is in the MVP race here early on. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody else who's had a better start than Byron Buxton here early on. And for the White Sox, Yermin Mercedes. I mean, by his fourth game, the guy was hitting .536. He had a .594 OBP, 1.451, so over 1,000 OPS through 7 games. Started the year 8 for 8, just absolutely electric. He's finally slowed down here just a little bit, but I mean, goodness gracious. He had a 485-foot moonshot last week of a home run. And for the White Sox, they didn't think that Yermin Mercedes was going to be one of their top offensive guys. After they lost Eloy Jimenez to the season with his pectoral injury there in March, robbing a home run at the end of spring training, Mercedes has come in and certainly been a huge surprise and a huge reason for optimism there if you're a White Sox fan. Now out in the AL West, starting with the Angels, you got Jared Walsh at first base. I mean, this guy has just been absolutely fantastic. I love watching Jared Walsh. He's made it clear that, Albert Pujols may be on his way out of the lineup. If he's not DH, and he's certainly not going to play first base. Walsh hitting .385, 3 home runs, 1.274 OPS through his first 8 games. He's been absolutely fantastic, and what I thought could be an area of concern for the Angels if they were running out Pujols day in and day out at first base. But Walsh has come in and basically taken that spot, and I don't think we're going to see Pujols down there anytime soon. And then also you got Shohei Ohtani just being absolutely electric early on. I mean, he's hit a ball 119 miles an hour exit velo. He's thrown a ball 101 miles an hour. He's got a .414 average, 3 home runs, a bomb that, is probably still up there in orbit somewhere, still hasn't landed yet. And, he's pitching well. He's got a 1.039 OPS. He's got 7 strikeouts in 4 innings. I mean, this guy may have the best tools in the history of baseball. If you're just going straight tools, stolen bases, hit, throw, speed, the 5 tools that they talk about, we haven't seen anything like the, Shohei Ohtani show here. And just as a general baseball fan, I'm really hoping that this guy can stay healthy because he is just so much fun to watch. Whether he's hitting or pitching, you may see something you haven't seen before when it comes to Ohtani. For the Astros, you got Christian Javier. I mean, he was sent down to the alternate site to get some work, but he's got a 2.08 ERA in 8 2/3 innings. He's going to be back up here soon, 11 strikeouts, just a bit of a numbers crunch there. When it comes to Javier, I don't think it's going to be long before we see him again up in the show. And then you got the offense. I mean, they've been fantastic. They started out 6-3. They stumbled here a little bit against the Tigers the past couple of days, but Bregman, Correa, Altuve, Gurriel, those 4 guys are hitting slumping a collective .694. They got an OPS here slugging. In 2020 they were down, but it's .960 in 2021. So from .694 up to .960, and it certainly thinks that or looks like that the Astros are going to be in the driver's seat here in the AL West unless the Angels continue to play good baseball and have something to say about it. For the Oakland Athletics, you got Lou Trevino. I mean, it was a tough start for the A's. They really struggled, but Trevino, he has only given up 1 run on 1 hit and 8 strikeouts over 6 2/3 innings. He could be Oakland's best reliever after, they lost a bunch of guys in the bullpen. We're looking at ultimately who could fill in those spots. Then they dealt with the injury to Rosenthal, but Trevino has been very good for them out of the bullpen. And then, of course, their schedule gets a little bit easier at this point. I mean, they were 3-7, allowing 32 more runs than they've scored, a -32 run differential. But they played the Astros and the Dodgers a couple of times. So things slowed down here for Oakland over the next couple of weeks, and they may be able to stabilize. The Seattle Mariners, it's Ty France, an infielder. He hasn't really played much in his career, but he's taken advantage of his opportunity with Seattle, hitting .324. He's got a .910 OPS. He's certainly looking like a promising figure for them here moving forward. Now, they started 5-4. They've had some injuries. James Paxton's going to have Tommy John surgery, but France over 300 again. He had a red-hot spring, and he's carried that over into the regular season to give Mariners fans some hope here as they transition into the regular season. For the Texas Rangers, you got Nate Lowe at first base. I mean, this guy has been very good for Texas here early on. He's cooled off a bit over the past couple of days, but he had 14 RBIs in his first 5 games. And, if you guys are doing the on-pace trick, right, what's that into 162? That would certainly break the RBI mark, but a couple of home runs, including a 465-foot bomb for Lowe here early in the year. And at first base, I didn't certainly see him being a positive for them. 3 home runs, 14 RBIs, like I said, could certainly be a star in the making here for the Rangers as they're looking for somebody outside of Joey Gallo to really help out this offense. They traded Odor, and they're looking for guys who could be part of that next wave in regards to contention for the Rangers, and it certainly looks like Nate Lowe is going to be the guy there. But, man, a ton of surprises. Some guys you may not have heard of there for the American League, but it's been fun to watch here early on in the year, seeing some guys step up, take advantage of some opportunities that have been given to them, and we'll see if they can carry it over here for the total of 162 over the course of 2021. But that'll wrap things up for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll step aside here now for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, and then we'll come back and talk about the National League. Who's giving some optimism? Who are the surprises? Stick around and find out.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back, and thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you haven't headed to social media yet, please do yourself a favor. Do myself a favor. Check us out there. I ask you guys every episode. You already know that. So head to Twitter. Check out GSMC Baseball. That's where you guys can stay up to date with all the latest news, notes, takes, hot takes, cold takes, whatever it is. We'll keep you guys posted on what's going on across the sport there. It'll be myself as well as the other hosts giving you guys our thoughts, our expectations, everything going on across baseball, as well as Facebook, GSMC Baseball. We got a Facebook page where we'll share articles with you guys, the latest information, intel that's happening across the sport. If somebody's been sent up, sent down, whatever it may be, you can find the latest information there, as well as LinkedIn, where you should follow the GSMC Podcast Network so you can stay up to date with the baseball-type stuff on Twitter and Facebook. Then when you head to LinkedIn, you can follow the Podcast Network for the latest news, notes, announcements, what's ever coming out of the Podcast Network. They'll keep you guys posted on that. So I certainly appreciate it. That helps us continue to grow, continue to spread the word as we continue to climb up the charts here as the greatest baseball podcast available on all the different platforms out there. So now we're going to talk about the National League. We just got done talking about the American League with the surprises and, who's the most promising starts or reasons for optimism. Now it's time to talk about the National League. Let's start out in the National League East with the Atlanta Braves. Huskar Ynoa. He's a right-handed pitcher, Ynoa. I don't even know how to pronounce his name there for the Braves, but through his first couple appearances of the year, he started for him once. He's been a reliever once, so the guy's very versatile. Well, he's got 6 scoreless innings, and he's going to get a couple of more starts here over the next couple of weeks based on some injuries and performances down there at Atlanta, and he's going to be fun to watch to see if he can keep this up. But outside of Ynoa, just the entire pitching staff in Atlanta. I mean, Acuna Jr. has been fantastic. He's on an MVP style of pace, 444 average, 9 extra base hits. He was electric against the Phillies all weekend in their series. But the arms in Atlanta are doing the heavy lifting. I mean, as a group, they got a 3.62 ERA, high strikeout rates, low home run rates, and for what could have been a weakness after they lost some guys in the bullpen, didn't really replace them with some heavy arms or names that people would remember, Atlanta's pitching staff has been excellent here through the first couple of weeks of the season. Now you're looking at the Miami Marlins, and this is a young team struggling a little bit, but there have been some bright spots. You got Dylan Floro, a right-handed pitcher who they got from the Los Angeles Dodgers in the offseason. He's got 5 appearances, no earned runs allowed. He could be headed towards that closer job here sooner than later. Their offense has really been struggling, so the bright spots in Miami are certainly on the pitching staff side of things. But Floro has been fantastic since coming over. And then in the starting rotation, you got Sandy Alcantara, who's flirting with Cy Young type of consideration here through his first couple of starts. He's been excellent. Couple of starts through his first 2. He had 17 strikeouts, only allowed 6 hits. Hasn't given up a home run yet. He's hitting 97, 98 miles an hour when it comes to his fastball. Mixing in some changeups. And this guy last year frustrated the National League East when they were only playing interdivisional games. And now the rest of Major League Baseball is going to get introduced to this guy because, man, he's nasty down there. A lot of people talking about Sixto Sanchez, but Sandy Alcantara is making it known that he's a top-end guy in the rotation. He's an ace of that staff, and he's certainly been fantastic here early on. Now for the New York Mets, they've had a tough start here early. Their first series canceled due to coronavirus. Then they had a game that started and was called by rain in the top of the first inning. A pitcher called them out here. Stroman wasn't unhappy that they started the game. Should have never started it. It was dangerous, but it's not all bad in New York because Brandon Nimmo has been very good out in the outfield out there. He's been a key for this team here. He's reached base in 13 of 23 plate appearances. They haven't really hit yet in New York. This guy walks all the time. He's been fantastic taking pitches. He's been very good. And then Pete Alonso starting to find his form here again. Through the first week of the season, he almost had a .350 on base percentage, which was way up from last year. He's got 98.1 mile an hour exit velocity on his baseballs put in play. So on the 12 batted balls, 98.1 coming out. So he's looking more and more like the guy who hit a rookie record 53 home runs back in 2019 than the guy who really struggled in 2020. And that's what the Mets are going to need here as they look to kind of gather their footing and get into the flow of games like the rest of the teams across Major League Baseball. For the Philadelphia Phillies, it's got to be this bullpen. It was historically bad last year, which everybody knows. The Phillies led in as many games as the Dodgers at one point during the 2020 season, and the Dodgers won the World Series, and the Phillies missed the playoffs. So it just goes to show what the heck they were dealing with last year and what they got this year. But they have overall in the bullpen a 3.73 ERA, and yet 6 relievers have made at least 3 appearances. So the guys they're going to very often outside of Vince Velasquez, who basically had to blow up the one time out, they have a 1.73 ERA. So the guys have been fantastic, and one real surprise there is Connor Brogdon. This guy, he came up last year a little bit, looked okay, but he certainly looks like a Ryan Madson 2.0 here in Philadelphia. 95, 96 mile an hour fastball, devastating changeup. He's been a lot of fun to watch, and not to mention the fact that he got 3 wins in each of his first appearances. So, he's 3-0 after 3 appearances this year and led the league in wins here for a moment. But Brogdon has been excellent, and the entire bullpen certainly gives Phillies fans promise looking into this year, even though that offense has struggled just a little bit. For the Washington Nationals, a couple of guys out there. You got Joe Ross, a right-handed pitcher. Ross has been terrific. He had 5 scoreless innings in one of his starts. And again, there's some guys there in Washington who have been good. They've struggled here out of the gate, but Ross, certainly a surprise. And then you got Steven Strasburg, who looks to be healthy again. He had a good opening start against Atlanta. 6 innings. He was injury-riddled all of last year after being World Series MVP. His fastball looks to be back where it was, has some nice zip on it. He's striking out 8, only allowed 1 hit, no runs here early on, so Strasburg looks to be feeling good back into that 2019 form, and that's what Washington's going to need if they're going to get back into contention here for the division moving forward. For the National League Central, you got the Brewers, Omar Narvaez behind the dish for them. I mean, offensively, the Brewers as a whole were not very good in 2020, but here in 2021, they've been better offensively, and Narvaez has been a big part of that. He's got a .520 on-base percentage. He leads the team in home runs, which is certainly surprising for a catcher there in Milwaukee. And then on the mound, Burns and Woodruff have been absolutely excellent. I mean, that's a really good 1-2 punch at the top of that rotation. Those two guys combined have a 1.54 ERA, 33 strikeouts, only 2 walks in 23 and a third innings. I mean, a 17-1 strikeout to walk ratio is just absolutely fantastic. So, man, it's been fun to watch those two guys pitch. And then, of course, Narvaez at the plate has really been carrying this team here offensively. For the St. Louis Cardinals, it's got to be Yadier Molina. I mean, the guy, they didn't want to re-sign him. Is he going to be able to hold up? Is he running out of gas here late in his career? What's going on? Well, he's been absolutely crushing baseballs. The guy's hitting .367, couple of clutch hits during a sweep over Miami. Started every game for them in St. Louis, so you just can't get rid of this guy. And then conversely, the new guy they added, Nolan Arenado, he's been excellent so far. I mean, he's been all they could hope for. He's hitting .333, 12 for 36, a couple of home runs. He's got Gold Glove, third base. He's playing great defense again. So if he can keep that up and carry the Cardinals to a division title, he may finally get MVP consideration here for the first time in his career. For the Chicago Cubs, got to be Jake Arrieta. And as a Phillies fan, man, it pains me to say that because he was not good for those 3 years in Philadelphia. But in a couple of starts, he's 2-0. I mean, the Cubs as a total have 4. So he's got half of their starts. He's, certainly looked better and more like the guy the Phillies thought they were signing now that he's back here in Chicago. But offensively, man, this team is really struggling. They're hitting a major league low 167 as a team, but Chris Bryant doing a bit of his part offensively. 7 hits, 4 are doubles, 2 are home runs. So out of the 7 hits, 6 are for extra bases. He's got already 3 barrels, which is a sabermetric you can look up on Baseball Savant. He had only 5, all of last year. So starting to square things up. But if Chicago continues to struggle, he may be moved here at the deadline moving forward. The Pittsburgh Pirates, what can we say about Pittsburgh? It's got to be Phillip Evans. He's really the only guy there who's really showing promise. I mean, Cabrian Hayes went down to the injury list. Evans has absolutely gone on a tear since replacing him at third base. He's got 3 home runs for them in Pittsburgh. He's been a lot of fun to watch. He's hitting .359, or he hit .359 last year. This year, he's 11 for 28 with 3 home runs. Like I mentioned, he's only struck out twice. His average miles an hour or exit velo on balls in play is 95.1. So again, they got a couple of third basemen that when Hayes comes back, you're going to have to keep Phillips in the lineup or Phillip Evans in the lineup because you just can't move on from a guy who's performing like that. And now for the Cincinnati Reds, you got Tyler Naquin, who's certainly been electric offensively as an outfielder for them. I mean, Indians fans cannot be happy watching Naquin just crush the ball for the Reds. He's tied for the Major League with 5 home runs. He's got a 78.3 hard hit percentage, so meaning 4 out of 5 balls that he's putting in play, he's hitting hard. That's frustrating for Indians fans to watch, but that offense as a whole has certainly been a historic turnaround because they had the lowest batting average as a team in the last 110 years last year, and now here in 2021 hitting .289. And Naquin, he's been the best guy offensively. Castellanos has been good, but you guys know that name as opposed to Naquin you may not have heard of, and he's been electric. So traveling out west now, looking at the Arizona Diamondbacks, as Asdrubal Cabrera. Some of you guys may have thought he was out of baseball, but he's in them, man, and he is hitting the ball far. He's got 3 home runs already. He's got 2 that were monster shots for them in Arizona. The Diamondbacks as a whole are struggling a little bit, but again, Cabrera's been excellent. Ketel Marte, when he was healthy, he was raking again. He was 12 for 26 and 2 home runs. So Marte and Cabrera really carrying the Diamondbacks, as even though they're struggling here early on here just a little bit. For the LA Dodgers, Corey Nebel, a right-handed pitcher. They signed Nebel, and we were okay, like, what's going on there? But he has yet to allow a hit in 4 appearances, even notching a couple of saves. They've been going back and forth here with Kenley Jansen, Corey Nebel, but he's been very good for them in the bullpen. And then offensively, everybody's hitting for him. I was looking at a guy to single out here, but you just can't do it because everybody's raking. They have 7 guys who have posted at least a 125-plus OPS over 20 plate appearances, which is even more than the Reds, who we just talked about having an electric offense. So the Dodgers offensively keep grooving, and it's going to be tough to slow them down at any point this year. For the San Francisco Giants, you got Evan Longoria. The old MVP, he's getting older in age. Is he slowing down? Well, not this year and not offensively. Hitting .333, 3 home runs, 1.061 OPS through his first 8 games. He's been absolutely fantastic for them there in the hot corner, and he's drinking that fountain of youth juice out in San Francisco. But the starting pitcher on that side of things has been very good. The Giants' starting rotation so far is a 2.32 ERA, only 2 home runs allowed. They're not striking a ton of guys out, but that huge park out there in San Francisco doesn't allow for the long ball, and they're taking advantage of that. And that's why they're off to a real nice start. Starting pitching, quality hitting. Longoria, Posey's been very good. So it's been a nice start for the G-men out in San Francisco. For the Padres, obviously Joe Musgrove. That's got to be the surprise. He threw a no-hitter last time out, ending the Padres' organizational drought of however many thousands of games we talked about. He looks like potentially their best starter with Blake Snell, Yu Darvish, all these guys, and Musgrove's the one guy that goes out and throws the no-no. So he's been electric, but their bullpen's been very good too. They've lost Fernando Tatis Jr., so offensively they're still finding their footing. But San Diego's bullpen leads the majors with a .84 ERA and a 5.8 strikeout-to-walk ratio. So they've been absolutely electric, which we thought they would. They added 3 closers in a previous life, and it's certainly showing that, it was a good move out there in San Diego. And then wrapping things up in Colorado, you got Ryan McMahon, second baseman. It's kind of been a wait-and-see game with McMahon up until this point, but he's finally starting to come on the scene here. He's got 5 home runs, tied for the most in the majors. He's been very good offensively, fun to watch, and he's starting to fill in Nolan Arenado's shoes. 12 for 37 on the year, so just under .333. He had 3 home runs in 1 game. He's looked good defensively at third base, so Arenado goes. Ryan McMahon transfers over to third base and has been very good filling in for Arenado and the Rockies here, even though they are struggling as a unit here early on in the season. So that does it here for segment number 2 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll step aside here once again for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little college baseball, give you guys an update on what's going on in the top 25 and whether anybody's really making a move. So stick around. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you guys are listening to this. You guys know my spiels by now. If it's Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, wherever this podcast is available, and that's on a ton of platforms out there. So whether you're Android, on Google Play, or you got an iPhone, you're listening on Apple Podcast, hit that star all the way on the right. If you are listening on Apple, that'll leave a 5-star review. You can write us a comment wherever you may be. I'll read them here on the show. If you guys have a question for me or a comment, certainly love to discuss them here moving forward. But that it really does help us grow up those charts, right? Because when people search baseball podcasts, there'll be the hip, trending, new ones that'll pop up. And the more reviews we can get, the more likes we can get, as that bring more awareness out there and continue to help us grow as a baseball podcast, bringing you guys great quality information here on a daily basis. I really appreciate it. So we talked about the surprises and what's going on at the major league level, but it's been a couple of weeks now, and I wanted to touch base and circle back with the college game. There aren't many collegiate baseball podcasts out there, and I know you guys as baseball fans listening to this, you at least follow the college game. You like to watch the College World Series. Check out Omaha when you can. So I want to keep you guys updated on ultimately how we're doing. Where are people standing? Who are going to be the top seeds? What's the top 25 look like? And like I said, there's been some changes since we were here in the past, and a few teams continuing to climb over the past couple of weeks. But the number one team in the country has changed just so slightly here this past week. It is now the Arkansas Razorbacks once again. They are 26-5 overall. They were 4-1 this past week, and they overtook Vanderbilt for that top spot after taking 2 out of 3 against Ole Miss. They had won 6 straight games before dropping that game on Saturday to Ole Miss, but found themselves right back in the win column once again. And they've been very impressive from the jump. They were in that State Farm College Baseball Showcase in Arlington, went 3-0 against 3 Big 12 teams. They're 9-3 now in conference play in the SEC, and they're just a really solid ball club all along, and are going to be there in Omaha, in my opinion. The number 2 team now is the Vanderbilt Commodores. They're 25-5, 9-3 as well in the SEC, but had a 2-2 week last week, which dropped them from number 1 to number 2 in the rankings as they lost 2 out of 3 to Georgia. It was the first conference series they lost on the year. Before this weekend series, they had won about 12 straight. They swept LSU, swept Missouri, won a couple of midweek games in there, but losing 2 out of 3 to Georgia, and with Arkansas's nice week, that flipped those guys in the standings. But Al Leiter Jr., Kumar Rocker, the top 2 guys there at Vanderbilt in the rotation, they're going to be picks number 1 and 2 in the draft. Last year it was certainly going to be Rocker going number 1. But the way Leiter Jr. has been throwing the ball this year, he's having a conversation now around ultimately who's going to go 1-2. But whichever big league teams finish last in the standings, they're going to be happy with either one of those guys they get. Both are absolutely filthy. Both are solid pitchers, high 90s, plus breaking balls, and they're just a ton of fun to watch. So if you can catch a Vanderbilt game on the weekend, either Friday or Saturday, when those guys are throwing, it is absolutely electric, especially at the college level. But the number 3 team is a team that's been climbing all throughout the standings here, and most recently, and that's the Texas Longhorns. This Texas team started 0-3, and they're now an overall 25-8. So 25-5, just like those top 2 teams over the past, however many weeks here. And they are currently on a, 9-game win streak. They swept Kansas and Kansas State in their 2 most recent conference series, so they're starting to figure things out in the Big 12 as they are 10-2 in the conference, and really a top team there with only losses to Oklahoma and Baylor on the schedule thus far. So coming up here now, they'll step out of conference for a weekend as they play Abilene Christian before jumping back in with Oklahoma State and Texas Tech over the next couple of weeks. But the Texas Longhorns playing fantastic baseball, getting hot here, and they've climbed all the way up to the number 3 ranked team in the country. Number 4 is Mississippi State. They are 24-7. They were 4-0 last week, and they are currently 8-4 in the SEC. They were swept by Arkansas, earlier in the year, but that's a number 1 ranked Arkansas team, so 24-4 outside of facing the top team in the country, and they've won 7 straight games. They swept Auburn this past weekend. They swept Kentucky the weekend before, and next up is Ole Miss, who's coming off a weekend trip to Vanderbilt here coming up. So Ole Miss, Mississippi State's going to be a fun one to watch. But the SEC continues to just reign supreme. I mean, they had the top 5 teams in the country at one point when we were discussing college baseball. Now it's 4 out of 5 as the Texas Longhorns have come up, and 5 out of the top 6 here, with the number 5 team now being the Tennessee Volunteers. They've continued to climb and climb and climb in the rankings. They are 27-6 here overall early on, 9-3 as well in the SEC, tied for first. They took 2 out of 3 this weekend over Florida after taking 2 out of 3 from Bama this past weekend. And one of the big matchups coming up here on the 16th, 17th, and 18th is Tennessee versus Vanderbilt. So these games will be in Tennessee. Number 2 Vanderbilt travels to Tennessee. That first game Friday on ESPNU, so check into that one if you have that one on your telecast. And then as well as the SEC Network will also carry a game here on Saturday. So Tennessee playing fantastic baseball as they've been locked in now, and we'll see really where they stand with the big boys as they get Vanderbilt coming up here this weekend. Number 6, the Ole Miss running Rebels. So let's see here. Mississippi, 24-8. They dropped down from number 3 to number 6 as they had a 3-2 week last week. They're 8-4 in the SEC, but lost 2 out of 3 to Arkansas. So Arkansas, again, number 1 ranked team, just played number 3, took 2 out of 3, drops you down to number 6, and now you'll face off against Mississippi State, who's number 4. So no rest for the wicked there at Ole Miss, and you get the Egg Bowl baseball style this weekend. So in the SEC, you got number 2 versus number 5, and then you got number 4 versus number 6 going at it this weekend. So great baseball in the SEC. If you guys can check that out, that's a fantastic slate. Number 7 is the first ACC team in here, and that's the Louisville Cardinal. They stay at number 7, even though they had themselves a 2-2 week last week. They are 12-5 in the ACC, but won 2 out of 3 against Florida State after losing a midweek game to Kentucky on the year. So playing an SEC team, taking the loss, but then getting back on track, winning 2 out of 3 in conference. And then they got a trip to Virginia coming up here. But Louisville at 20-10, the first double-digit loss team, but still loaded with talent down there in Louisville, which is why they're still up in those rankings. Number 8, you got Texas Tech. They are 22-7 overall, but they are only 5-4 in Big 12 play. They went 2-1 this past week. They had lost 3 straight. They lost 2 out of 3 to Kansas State a few weeks ago before taking 2 out of 3 against TCU. Now they got a midweek series against Stephen F. Austin coming up, followed by a conference trip to West Virginia. So Texas Tech will look to stabilize the ship there against the Mountaineers coming up this weekend. At number 9, we got East Carolina, 26-5. They had a 4-0 week as they are 8-0 in the American Athletic Conference, the AAC. They have won 9 straight games. They swept Memphis in a 4-game series after sweeping Cincinnati and a win against North Carolina mixed in there. Then they'll travel to Houston before facing off against UCF. So they are in conference play down there in the AAC, and East Carolina looks like the top team in that conference. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish come in at number 10. This is a surprise. Nobody thought Notre Dame was this good. They continue to climb up from number 13. They're 15-6 overall. 14-6 in the ACC here, as ACC teams not playing a lot of out-of-conference games, but they took 2 out of 3 against Pittsburgh a few weeks ago, and then 2 out of 3 against Georgia Tech this weekend. And next they'll face off against NC State in a nice matchup here coming up this weekend. Number 11, you got the South Carolina Gamecocks. They are 21-9 overall. They had a tough week going 2-2. They are 8-4 overall in the SEC. They took 2 out of 3 against Missouri, but did lose a midweek game to North Carolina. So a little bit of a rivalry there, and the Tar Heels took that one. Now they will travel to LSU for a nice matchup in the SEC here between South Carolina and LSU coming this weekend. At number 12, that's where we are. We got TCU, 22-9 overall, 7-2 in Big 12 play. They went 2-2 this past weekend, fell from number 10 to number 12. They lost 2 out of 3 to Texas Tech after having a win streak of about 15 games before that. So TCU playing good baseball, but Texas Tech got them this weekend in conference play. Oklahoma State at number 13. They are 21-7-1. They got themselves a tie, 6-3 in the Big 12 schedule here. They took 2 out of 3 against West Virginia before facing off in a non-conference weekend and sweeping UNC Wilmington. So they'll get back into conference play with a trip to TCU, followed by a visit from Texas. So we'll find out more about Oklahoma State here in the next couple of weekends. You got Louisiana Tech at number 14. They are 24-7, 4-0 this past week, jumping up from 16 up to 14, 10-2 in Conference USA, as that's the first Conference USA team in here. They took 3 out of 4 from UAB and swept Rice this past weekend. Now they'll welcome Southern Miss and Marshall over the next couple of weeks as they look to continue a hot stretch. Number 15, you got the Oregon Ducks. They are 19-7, the first Pac-12 team. A 3-1 week pushed them up from 19 to 15. They are 6-3 in the Pac-12. They swept Oregon State this past weekend, and now they'll face off with USC, Southern California. They'll take a travel to L.A., and Oregon USC, always a fun one to watch, even in baseball. Number 16, you got the Arizona Wildcats. They jump up from number 22. They're 21-9 this year, 7-5 in Pac-12 play. Let's see here, we're 3-2 this past week. They took 2 out of 3 from California and 3 out of 4 from Arizona State. So they'll travel now to face the Washington State Cougars as they continue Pac-12 play. At number 17, the Virginia Tech Hokies. They are up from number 23 after a 4-0 week. They are 14-7 in the ACC. They swept Wake Forest and took 2 out of 3 against Boston College before that. And now they got a midweek game against Liberty before facing Georgia Tech, who at one point was ranked in the top 10 this year as well. The Florida Gators at number 18, they fall all the way from number 12 to 18 after a 3-2 week. They are only 6-6 in the SEC. This past weekend, they did lost 2 out of 3 to Tennessee. They did win a midweek game against Florida State this week, but next they'll face off against Missouri and Auburn as they look to continue a nice season. Number 19, you got the Pitt Panthers. They're up from number 24. They went 4-1 this week. They are 12-9 in the ACC. They swept Miami to complete their sweep of the state of Florida as they swept Florida State earlier, but losing 2 out of 3 to Notre Dame, defeating West Virginia in a rivalry game, and then sweeping Miami. Next up is North Carolina, followed by Louisville. So a couple of nice conference matchups there to see if the Pitt Panthers can continue a nice start to their season. At number 20, you got the Stanford Cardinals, 6-3 in the Pac-12, 19-6 overall. First time in the rankings as they were unranked last week. They went 3-1 this past week. They took 2 out of 3 against UCLA and 2 out of 3 against Washington State the past couple of weekends. And next up is a trip to Arizona State as they continue down the list. Next up, you got Charlotte. Conference USA once again here, 11-1 in Conference USA. They were unranked last week, had themselves a 4-0 week as they swept Florida International, coming off a sweep against Florida Atlantic as well. So 8 straight wins for Charlotte before facing off against UTSA coming up here in the next couple of weeks. Number 22, you got Old Dominion. ODU at 24-6 enters the rankings after being unranked, 10-2 in Conference USA play. They had won 12 straight games before losing Sunday to Florida Atlantic, but took 3 out of 4 there, swept Marshall, and then 3 out of 4 against Florida International. So a nice stretch there for Old Dominion as they enter the rankings. At number 23, you have Indiana State to the Missouri Valley Conference. The Sycamores, 16-8. They were unranked last week, but entered the rankings here after taking 3 out of 4 from Illinois State and 2 out of 3 from St. Louis the week prior. They'll face Valparaiso and then Dallas Baptist over the next couple of weeks. And then at number 24, Florida State, who falls from 17 after a 1-3 week, 16-13 overall, 11-10 in the ACC. They lost 2 out of 3 to Louisville and lost a midweek game here to Florida, as Florida and Florida State have themselves a nice tussle. And then finally, the 25th ranked team, they stay there, is the Michigan Wolverines. They are 15-7 overall and 15-7 in Big Ten play. They took 2 out of 3 from Ohio State after splitting with Maryland and Northwestern earlier in the week. Next up, they got a trip to Minnesota, followed by a visit from Rutgers coming to town here. And the teams that had dropped out of the rankings were Georgia Tech, fell all the way from 15 to unranked after a 1-3 week. You have the Miami Hurricanes dropping from 18 to unranked. And then Oregon State 20 to unranked, and UCLA from 21 to unranked after all of those teams went at least 1-3 this past weekend to drop out of the top 25. But the SEC reigns supreme, 5 out of the top 6. You got 2 fantastic matchups this weekend, and then a lot of ACC depth as you continue down through the top 25. But that'll wrap things up here for segment number 3 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll step aside one last time here for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we're going to get you guys up to date on the standings here in Major League Baseball. What happened during the first series of the week, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday series. I'll let you guys know right after this.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. It is Monday, April 19th. Appreciate you guys listening in. We're back after a few days off here, doing some things internally, getting caught up to date with you guys here. So some of this recording was done earlier in the week. This segment here is Sunday afternoon because I have to do some travel for work on Monday. So what I talked to you guys about this past week won't include any of Sunday's action, but there was a ton happening this past week that I want to discuss with you guys here, starting off with the Carlos Rodon no-hitter that took place on Wednesday. What a fascinating outing by Rodon. He was 2 outs away from a perfect game when he hit a guy, HBP, with a back foot slider that ended up being a literal back foot slider with 2 outs in the 9th inning. Just a shame that it had to end that way because it wasn't even that square on the back foot, but ultimately he does get the no-hitter despite losing the perfect game here in the 9th inning. And there are some fascinating facts to go along with this no-hitter to talk about with you guys. This was the 20th no-hitter in White Sox history. That's the most for any American League team, which I certainly would have not guessed. I mean, I would have had Yankees, Red Sox, whoever it may be, but the White Sox would not have been at the top of the list if I were to take a guess. And this is second all-time in Major League Baseball behind the Los Angeles Dodgers, who have 23. Now, Giolito threw one last year. Rodon throws one this year, so 20 now all-time for the White Sox, which is absolutely fascinating. And speaking of missing a perfect game by hit by pitch, of course, last week we had a no-hitter throw by Joe Musgrove of the Padres, and both of those games were not perfect just due to a hit by pitch. And this has only happened 6 times since 1900. So 2 times this season and only 6 times since 1900. Just a fascinating kind of statistic there for it to happen twice in a week and only happened 6 times in 100+ years. And the only other time a perfecto was lost by a 9th inning hit by pitch has only happened 2 other times. One was by Max Scherzer in 2015, and the other was by Hooks Witzel back on July 4th in 1908. So only the third time since 1900 losing a perfect game on a hit-by-pitch in the ninth inning. Just kind of fascinating. But with the non-perfecto taking place, the last one we've seen is still by King Felix. Felix Hernandez was perfect back on August 15th, 2012. So this is the longest drought that we've had in between perfect games since 1968 to 1981. Catfish Hunter threw a perfect game in 68, and then Len Barker had a perfect one in 1981. So longest drought since 1981 in between perfect games in Major League Baseball. As well as already having 2 no-hitters by the time April rolls around. This is the first time since 1994 that this has taken place. And April 14th is the earliest calendar date in April that we've had 2 no-hitters in the history of Major League Baseball. So 2 no-hitters in April happened in 1994, but none of them were quicker than April 14th with Musgrove and Rodon taking place here. Just, a ton of crazy statistics going on here. As well as 4 days in between no-hitters this year. This was the fewest amount of days since 2011 when Francisco Liriano and Justin Verlander threw no-hitters 4 days in between each other. Just the craziness involved here is absolutely tremendous. But diving in a little bit, baseball savant style, Rodon, 57 fastballs, exactly 50% of his 114 pitches. He averaged 95 miles an hour on those fastballs, and his 3 fastest pitches all came in the ninth inning. So my man was amped up by the end of the day here as he threw one 97.9, 98.8, and 97.5. So he was humping it up in the ninth inning. And only since 2008, since pitch tracking began, 2 left-handed starters have ever thrown a pitch faster than 98.8 in the ninth inning. CC Sabathia did it one time, and James Paxton has done it a couple of times. So the dude was humping it up for the first time in a long time for the Chicago White Sox. But the White Sox, man, another no-hitter with guys like Giolito, Keuchel, Lynn. It's Carlos Rodon who throws the no-no here to start off the 2021 season. Next on the list, we got Max Scherzer. He passed Cy Young on the all-time strikeout list this week. He has 2,808 strikeouts career now, which is good for 22nd all-time, as he passed Cy Young's mark of 28,803. Next time out, he'll probably pass Mike Mussina, and soon this year, he should jump all the way into 19th, passing Jim Bunning, and just shy of Justin Verlander, who has 3,013. And with Verlander being hurt, who knows if he comes back? It looks like he wants to come back, but those two are the top active guys in strikeouts, and they should be 18 and 19 by the end of this regular season. So congrats to Max Scherzer. He continues to dial things up at the age of 36, with Justin Verlander being at the age of 38. May ultimately pass those guys and get into the top 15, even potentially the top 12, and then you get to the 3,300 mark for Scherzer. The Dodgers and Padres, they've started a fantastic series that is much must-watch baseball early on here. It looks like a playoff series in the month of April. I mean, we had the benches clear one game after a couple of hit-by-pitches. We had a controversial catcher's interference, extra innings going to 12 innings, home runs and extras back and forth. And then game 2 of the series Saturday night, we had a walk-off diving catch by Mookie Betts out in center field to preserve a 2-0 victory. Runners on second and third, 2 outs. He made an excellent catch to keep that game 2-0. So if you guys haven't watched these games, I know it's hard here on the East Coast if you're listening, but check out Sunday's matchup on TV because it has just been fascinating baseball, and there's already bad blood in between these two teams, and it started game 1. So every game that these guys play, it is just going to be a ton of fun to watch. There's going to be fireworks. Trevor Bauer goes against Blake Snell on Sunday. Man, it is just great stuff going on in the diamond there out west. You also had Jacob deGrom almost making history over the weekend. He struck out 9 straight batters against the Rockies, which was one shy of Tom Seaver's major league record, as well as franchise record. Seaver struck out 10 straight guys, which is absolutely fascinating to think about. But DeGrom goes 3 innings, striking out the side 9 straight, one shy of Seaver. And DeGrom is just on a different level. I mean, this guy is clearly the best pitcher in baseball. He had 14 strikeouts again for the second straight start, only over 6 innings, so 14 out of 18 outs recorded via the strikeout. And if you enjoy pitching and just kind of enjoy baseball in general, make sure you're tuning into these Mets outings where DeGrom's going, because it is just so much fun to watch this guy throw a baseball here early on. And we also had Sean Kazmir Jr. back in the big leagues with the Atlanta Braves for the first time since 2008. I think it was 12 years, 200-plus days where Kazmir finally got an at-bat and an appearance again at the age of 36 for the Braves. He played 19 games back in 2008 for the Padres. He was 8 for 39, a double, couple of RBIs, hitting .205, and then he was 0 for 1 in his pitch hitting appearance with the Braves. But just shout out to Kazmir Jr., ultimately showing perseverance, playing over 1,000 games straight in the minor leagues in between 2008 and 2021 here. So just always fun to see a guy like that get a shot at the major league level and, be able to perform here, hopefully, and get a couple of more at-bats for the Braves before he gets sent back down. We're also dealing with our first COVID outbreak of Major League Baseball in the 2021 season. The Minnesota Twins are up to 4 positive tests of COVID-19 here over the past week. We'll have to wait and see ultimately when they get back into action here because, they continue to have positives. Last week, it was Andrelton Simmons who tested positive earlier in the week. He hasn't been around the team since this past Tuesday. Then you had Kyle Garlick testing positive, another unnamed player, as well as a staff member. So 3 players, 1 staff member have now tested positive for the Twins as their weekend series ultimately was canceled against the Angels. And not really sure when they're going to be back in action, kind of stepping away here, getting things under wraps and ultimately trying to get the virus under control before they get back out here onto the field. And the last bullet point I want to highlight before we dive into the standings here, wrapping things up on Sunday, is the New York Yankees. They dropped to an American League worst 5-9 to start this season. I mean, raise your hand out there if you had the Yankees having the worst record in the American League as of April 18th. And I can't see you guys having this be an audio podcast, but none of you should have your hands raised. Even if you're a Red Sox fan out there, I don't think you saw this coming with the Yankees being the betting favorite in the American League, a World Series favorite. It's just a slow start in New York, and this is the latest in a season where the Yankees have had the worst record in the American League since a 9-17 start all the way back in 1991. So it's been 20 total years since the Yankees have had the worst record in the AL as of April 18th. And, man, it's going to be tough for them to turn things around here, but it's still early, not a 60-game sprint season, or, of course, there would be a lot more concern in New York, but over 162, they're certainly thinking they could figure things out. But losing 4 straight to fall to 5-9 is not what you were looking for in New York. And speaking of the standings, keeping you guys up to date here on what's going on. As of Sunday, the Boston Red Sox in first place in the American League East. They are 9-1 in their last 10 and 10-4 overall. A plus 26 run differential, which is tops in the American League. Only 1 back of the Reds for tops in all of baseball, or the Dodgers, so 3rd in baseball here as I'm looking at the standings. But the Red Sox off to a fantastic start. Started 0-3 and now 10-1 in their last 11 and 9-1 in their last 10 there in Boston. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th all tied in the American League East. The Orioles, Blue Jays, and Rays are all 7-8 here early on the season. They're trying to figure things out. The Orioles, certainly a surprise. The Blue Jays, Vlad Guerrero Jr. has been tremendous here early on. He lost that weight, and it's certainly showing as he's been fantastic to start. And then, of course, the Yankees at the bottom of that division there at 5-9, losing 4 in a row since being 5-5. In the American League Central, you got the surprise Kansas City Royals still at the top of the division at 8-5. They are 6-4 in their last 10. A nice start there for the Royals in Kansas City. The Indians at 7-7. The White Sox 6-8. They're at 6-8, even having a plus 13 run differential. So they are winning a lot of games by a ton of runs and losing some close ones here early on. They've lost their last 2 after being 6-6. And then the Twins at 6-8 and the Tigers at 6-9. So the Twins and White Sox off to a bit of a slow start there in the American League as they're looking to turn things around. And then out west, things are surprising here. I mean, the Astros started 4-0. They are now 7-7, 3-7 in their last 10. They do have a plus 11 run differential, even though they have that 500 record. But the Angels are at the top of the division at 8-5. Now, they've played a couple of less games due to the matchups with the Twins being postponed here, but the Angels off to a nice start. Shohei Ohtani continues to deal. Mike Trout coming out of a bit of a mini slump there, and certainly fun to watch if you're an Angels fan. You also have the Mariners at 9-6. My surprise, Seattle Mariners playing good baseball here early on. Nice to see. The Oakland Athletics, they are now 8-3 in their last 11 after starting 0-4, 1 game out. And then the Rangers at the bottom of the division at 6-9. So in the American League, your current playoff picture looks like the Red Sox, Royals, and Angels being the 3 teams winning the divisions. And your 2 wild card teams are the Mariners at 9-6 and the Athletics at 8-7, just ahead of the Indians at 7-7 here early on. So the Mariners a surprise, Angels, Royals, Red Sox, the entire American League playoff picture, certainly a surprise here early on in the season. Now looking at the National League, the New York Mets have been playing some good baseball. They're currently at 6-4. They've had some games postponed early on, so haven't played as many as everybody else. In second place, you have the Marlins and Phillies at 7-7, but the Marlins 6-4 in their last 10, and the Phillies at 3-7 in their last 10. So those guys kind of trending different directions as the Phillies are 6-2 at home and 1-5 on the road as they have a horrible road record. I think it's 78 and like 113 or 112 since 2018 on the road, and have just really struggled to figure it out. You got the Nationals at 5-7, having won 2 straight games, starting to turn things around. And then the Atlanta Braves in the basement. Similar to the Yankees, I didn't have the Braves in the basement at 6-9 with a minus 11 run differential here early on. So the Braves a disappointment through the first couple of weeks here of the season. In the National League Central, you got the Reds continuing to stay hot. They're 9-5, like I said, plus 27 run differential as that offense continues to smoke baseballs. They are 7-1 at home, 2-4 on the road. So similar to the Phillies, struggling a little bit away from home there in Cincinnati. You got the Brewers in second place at 8-6 and 7-3 in their last 10 after a 1-3 start for Milwaukee. St. Louis 7-7, the Cubs at 6-8, and the Pirates at 6-9 to round out the National League Central, with the Pirates at 5-5 in their last 10. So started 1-4, but playing 500 ball here for the past week and a half. And good, things looking up for the Buccos there in Pittsburgh. Out west, with the Dodgers taking the first 2 against the Padres, you now have the Dodgers in first place at 13-2. Clearly the best team in baseball once again here this year. The Giants, been a great surprise early on, 8-6, but having lost 2 in a row, trying to stabilize the ship there in San Francisco. You got the Padres at 9-7, the Diamondbacks at 5-10, and the Rockies at 4-11, as though those 2 teams look to be in the basement of that division here. So in the National League, your playoff picture is currently the Mets, Reds, and Dodgers leading their divisions, and then ultimately you have the Brewers and Giants as the wild card here early on, with the Padres back based on winning percentage. So the Padres looking to bounce back here Sunday, not get swept by the Dodgers, but certainly some surprises as well as disappointments through the first couple of weeks when it comes to the baseball season here. But another fantastic week of baseball, a lot going on. Rodon, no-hitter, Dodgers, Padres, Scherzer, DeGrom, Kazmir, the Twins, the Yankees. It is just coming at you full force as we're getting through the month of April here and transitioning to the month of May. But that'll wrap things up for today's episode. Once again, I appreciate you guys listening out there. Check us out on social media, the GSMC Baseball Podcast. That's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, as well as please rate and review the podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating, give us that thumbs up, click subscribe so you guys will get the latest episodes as soon as they're released here from the GSMC Podcast Network. But that'll do it for today's episode. Once again, I am Kevin Mahalik. Thanks for listening, everyone. Hopefully you guys enjoyed your work week out there and your weekend as the weather's starting to turn to spring. It's certainly more fun to get outside and enjoy a baseball game in person if you can. But like I said, that'll do it. I'll talk to you guys once again this Thursday. Have a good week, everybody, and I'll talk to you then.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.